Welcome to the world of challenges and mega economic transformations. In light of the new trends that could transform the global economy, open wide horizons that made it an orbit for various challenges and trying to identify the opportunities. In the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia, the home of vision and mega projects in the homeland that is witnessing the largest redirection towards a future and the mega rediscovery of fortunes in this land, the knowledge, the human capabilities, and in all of these challenges, the knowledge economy emerges as one of the key pillars that the new economies are going to be established and will be the foundation of competition, success, transformation, and the making of the future in the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia. There are wide horizons for the knowledge economy and the research centers, studies, universities, knowledge and information technology. The Communication and Financial Knowledge Center, the Ministry of Finance, with its quality, influential presence to build effective strategic communication, opens today a webinar and a discussion that deals with the importance of investing in research to enable the knowledge economy. Our partners in this discussion, Dr. Abdulaziz bin Sakr, the chairman of the Gulf Research Center, Dr. Abdulaziz Al-Raddadi, head director of the general supervisor of the national planning at King Abdulaziz City for Science and Technology, here in the studio. And through the web, Dr. Yama Kotelin from Manama, and Mr. Mazen Al-Suderi, the head of research at Al-Rajhi Financial. Welcome. I believe that the first challenge is in identifying the concept of knowledge economy. What is knowledge economy? So let us take a first approach to put the definition within context with Dr. Abdullah. First, I would like to thank the Ministry of Finance for such enriching seminars and discussions. Knowledge economy, in simple terms, means turning information and knowledge into a fortune and benefiting from that. And this transformation by investing sciences and technologies and transforming knowledge and data into services and products that can be marketed economically and to achieve a financial income. So this could probably the easiest or most simple, direct definition of knowledge economy. From a research perspective, scientific research is probably the early stage into building the knowledge economy. It is a stage where the scientific discoveries and the foundational research is made. Then the think tanks and research centers transform these discoveries into other forms, such as patents or industrial products, before turning these and products into the markets. Here, which is the innovation stage, is where the marketing takes place, and we launch the products in a commercial way. There is a kind of intersection between the research system and the economic systems, and this intersection is what defines the knowledge economy. The research center, or the research system, is a motivator of the economic system, and this is the advantage of knowledge economy. Countries have based their development on their intellects and their minds and their brains, and they built their knowledge economy. This is the bottleneck to build the knowledge economy. We find in many countries that have excelled because of these brains and these research centers that vitalize their financial centers. Dr. Abdulaziz, welcome to our seminars, but we're speaking about an economy of inputs. Of the inputs in this economy are not material or natural resources, right? Of course. Well, first, good evening. and welcome to all our guests through the internet in this center, and thanks also to the Communication and Financial Knowledge Center. In addition to what Dr. Abdullah has said, there's an important point. In the studies and research, you are bringing prior experiences and you're building on top of that. Therefore, you reach the innovation level and then you can achieve its impact on products and also on knowledge economy in general, because at the end of the day, this presents the best experiences. And therefore, we find in some countries they were very keen on investing in this sector. For example, in South Korea, they have a big percentage. They have over 6,500 researchers for a million inhabitants. So if we take the global expenditure, which is $1.7 or $700 billion, it is all in the knowledge economy, in research, in R&D. These are part of the knowledge economy. However, they are the foundation, the nucleus from which stems most of the innovations and inventions that take place. So the more focus on the R&D and turning that into experiments, either scientifically or in economic indicators, or in social sciences, or what we call as social studies, we can save so much for countries and push their economies to greater levels. Of course, we will speak later on about the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia's experience in knowledge economy and how technology and the implementation of technology provided endless services. And the Kingdom has become extremely ahead in the field of knowledge economy because of the good use and application of knowledge economy and its tools in serving the country. Mr. Mazen Al-Sudairi, let us now specifically speak about research and knowledge in the financial sector. Let us somehow shed some light or take an overview to the centricity of knowledge economy in building a new economy. Now, this mega transformation we're witnessing in our economy here is based on a cornerstone, which is the diversification of the income sources. Where does knowledge economy stand? Where is the position of knowledge economy in this jigsaw? Thank you, Mr. Yahya, for hosting me, and greetings to all our participants and all our viewers. Of course, that's a very key topic. Saudi Arabia's entrance, like we are part of this world, into the realm of knowledge economy. There are economic indicators such as KAI is issued by the World Bank, or the Global Knowledge Index, which is issued by the United Nations. All of these indices have four corners: education, research and development, ICTB in the economy, and the incentivizations. These are the foundations that provide the sustainability of knowledge economy in our kingdom. I would say again that we are part of this world, and the services sector has grown tremendously in the kingdom recently, especially after launching Vision 2030, which started in 2016. We noticed that the services grew, the sector grew, and other sectors emerged. So there's more presence for the knowledge economy. That doesn't mean it is not there in other sectors. However, its eminence started to be more visible. The world at large is moving from in the services sector. So the initiative of the Line and the NEOM and other mega projects and the cities economies have 84% of the world economies, because the world economy is mostly services economy. The industrial and agricultural in the United States sectors, they are 20. The services is 40%. Now in the US, the services sector is 78%, and the industrial and the agricultural only 6%. The technology has helped increase or tip the balance towards the knowledge economy, and that gave more balance to cities. This is part of the changes that we will see, and we hope that will be diversified in the other sectors as well. Let me move on now to Dr. Yamar Kotelan. In general, now in light of the fourth industrial revolution, in light of this digital revolution, also as a sort of explaining the concept of knowledge economy. Is knowledge economy an outcome of the fourth industrial revolution, or is it one of the factors that participated in the emergence and progress of the fourth industrial revolution? In other words, this mega transformation in the world of big data.
Yes, thank you very much, Mr. Yahya, and thank you for the Ministry, of course, for having me in this very, very important discussion. Is the fourth industrial revolution the result? Is it an input? I think it is a lot of these things at the same time. It is an important element and reflection of the world that we are living in today. But I think it is also a reflection of the way the knowledge economy is evolving. And what I mean by that is that right now, of course, we have more information in the world being generated all the time than ever before. And this process of digitization is helping us both generate and capture more of it. Clearly, for the future and for our ability to take advantage of this, information as raw information has very little value. You can have too much of it. You can have something that psychologists call information overload. And what you need is the kind of broad infrastructure or ecosystem that, for instance, Mr. Mazen talked about. For instance, the World Bank's four pillars in order to create this knowledge economy that can take advantage of this information. And what's important to realize is that these elements, the people, the infrastructure, institutions, and laws, they are interdependent. They are mutually reinforcing. You cannot have some of them and not all of them. That typically doesn't work. There are no magic bullets because this is an evolutionary process. And I think the fourth industrial revolution in some ways is an integral part of it. But while this doesn't happen overnight, I think it is something that people can accelerate through technology and digitization, through government incentives and structures, for instance, such as the open innovation ecosystem. But I think there's another area here that is very important to where we are going, and it matters especially in the Gulf context, because we think of the knowledge economy as a macro thing, as something that happens at the national level. I think this is beginning to happen at the micro level as well, and companies have to be involved for knowledge to turn into products. You need the demand and the supply. And what is interesting to me about the environment that Gulf businesses operate in right now is that the value of innovation, knowledge, dynamism is growing. Why? Because there's more competitive and economic pressure on companies. Growth has slowed down. There is fiscal consolidation that is eroding margins. There are the new labor market realities that are forcing companies to behave differently. And I think that what's interesting about the Industrial Revolution is how it potentially connects all these elements and pushes for the evolution of the knowledge economy, both from top down as well as bottom up.
Thank you. Now, in the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia, we have what we can describe as, we're not going to say an early experiment. However, it is an experiment that could, in a short time, create a sort of impact and build a real trend in knowledge economy. This was administered by CACS, the King Abdulaziz City for Economy. And how did CACS start? What were your objectives in the beginning? What were the areas that you developed in knowledge economy and then were aligned with the vision requirements? King Abdullah, the City for Science and Technology, started to pay attention to knowledge economy with the National Plan for Science and Innovation, which was launched in 2008 and 2009. This plan aimed to incentivize the research system in the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia, and over the past 10 years, this is statistically speaking, in the last 10 years, what the research system has been produced equals what was produced over the past 4 decades. So the plan led to good results, such as what? Such as research papers, patents, industrial innovations. There has been a lot of activity in the research community, as we can call it, and a real contribution in research. The next step was, and of course it was more important, is to connect this scientific system with the industrial system. And it started with the, of course, you mean the industrial sector. You mean turning these ideas into outcomes. Yes, turning the outcomes of the research as input for the economic system. It started with the National Transformation Program, with the different initiatives such as the health nationalization and such as the Genome program in Saudi. The city led the strategy of development and innovation in the development in industries and national logistics. Here we paid attention to developing the economy in a great number of sectors, such as the key sectors in the program, such as the minerals, logistics, and the power sectors, and other such as health, science, space, water, and electricity, and other sectors as well in the kingdom. Our goals at KAXT were to incentivize the research in the industrial area, in the sector, and to include it, and to enhance the enablers. We spoke earlier about the infrastructure and about the human resources, and Mr. Mazen spoke about the importance of education. The human resources are key player in these initiatives and programs. Therefore, we launched a number of programs and initiatives in order to develop and enhance the capabilities of human resources, the infrastructure, to become a positive environment or a joint environment between the research and industrial systems, such as we find now in the science and technology oases, which build on global experiments in this regard. Dr. Abdelaziz, you are one with a great experience in this field in the think tank and research centers. But don't you believe with me that somehow on the outcomes of research and think tanks is more of a theoretical aspect? Probably it has to do with the knowledge, with its intellectual or political aspects, and it somehow stayed a little bit far from the knowledge that can be or could be transformed into input into the industrial sector. Of course, there are two types of research. There are applied sciences, and in that case you are doing experiments and studies and products, and you turn them into commodities or products that can be part of programs, or commodities or services that can be sold. In social sciences and humanities, you are trying to study certain phenomena, social economics, social dynamics. You study the international aspects of the international relations. You have the Arab, Islamic, and international dimensions of our relations. All these, because you cannot expand in the knowledge economy unless you have full-scale knowledge of humanities, social studies, including the political and economic aspects. The vision is based on diversification of income resources, and that means I'm not going to be depending on the key commodity, which was our main power, which is oil. Now you are playing a different game, and you're turning that concept into a different one, and you are diversifying the income resources. That must be based on economic studies, social studies, the abilities of people to expand the purchasing power, the age groups, the trends. So all of these are integrated, and what we call as the applied sciences and humanities integrate and complement each other, so that unless you achieve that integration, you cannot reach your goal. We always feel like the leadership is speaking about the youth generation. This generation has different requirements. Unless you, in social studies, do enough studies about their behaviors, their trends, their dreams, and you can't decide how you can identify their learning needs, their health needs, their employment needs and developments. We feel today that we have an open generation which is ready to effectively participate with their tech-savvy generation. They can in Saudi Arabia, they can use technology is very high. We are probably the highest technology users in the Arab and the Islamic countries as well. In short, how can you evaluate the Gulf experience in the think tanks and research centers from the perspective of their supporting role where these economies are benefiting from? When I established the Gulf Research Center in about 20 years ago, our mission was knowledge for everyone. Therefore, for me, I am very happy to speak about the knowledge economy because we believed on day one that unless we have a Gulf nation that has a knowledge of opportunities and of the economies of the Gulf economies in 2001 or 2003, the economic agreement at the Gulf State the GCC Council, which laid the foundations of economic and trade cooperation, the movement of individuals, all that can help the GCC economy. The foundation was the knowledge economy. And could these research centers and think tanks offer all that they can? I still believe there is still a gap, and that still exists because the rhythm of the requirements of the GCC population is faster than the research tempo. They want to achieve a faster transformation. For example, His Royal Excellency, the Crown Prince, he took 2 mobiles, an old one and a new one, as an example of the fastness of move and development. So in technology, unless we had this fast developing technology, we were not able to provide the services that we are having, that especially in combating the coronavirus, the pandemic, and all these developments. And we have been classified and on top or ahead of many countries in the use of technology to the service of people. I would like to move on to Mr. Mazen now. Now in the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia, if we speak about research and studies in the financial sector, the Kingdom in the financial sector has a quality experience in fintech, in payments, building the knowledge economy, or a knowledge that developed the financial sector. From your perspective, how can we evaluate this experience over the past 3 or 5 years? Where was the knowledge economy effective and impactful in this transformation in the financial sector? Recently, as I said, there was great interest in the technology in the banking sector. However, there was a big development in fintech in Saudi, so they introduced new elements that became key players in the market that increased competitiveness and they enlarged the market. For example, the STC, that you have STC Pay, is an or extra financing. These were not related to the banking sector. Now, these loans or these SMEs total loans according to IMF was less than 2% of the Saudi loans. Now it is over 8% with the increased level of loans. It was 4 times increased. The SMEs had no information that helped the banks to create venture samples. So fintech increased data, increased the knowledge of banks of these SMEs and the financial to identify the supply and demand. It enhanced the market and allowed it to reach to new clients. We are still at the beginning with the development of technology and ideas. Fintech is only a part of the international dimensions on an organizational level. But now, if we speak for the future about the banking sector, the banking industry is going to be an essential part of any economy. Money and banks are the blood of the economy, so it is part of any development, and it was a positive addition. Probably this is the issue of international technologies or knowledge technology or knowledge economy or big data knowledge. To what extent has knowledge economy participates in producing these outcomes and turning these into impactful or economically impactful elements?
Well, this is the key question when we knowledge economy. After all, we have had institutions. It is to generate knowledge. We've had them for centuries. For instance, universities. But the key question is how can that knowledge be taken into economic outcomes? And I think that this is a process that globally and in the region is definitely underway. But I think that it is still very uneven. It's evolving in different ways in different countries. And part of the reason is that I think we live in a world where some elements of the knowledge economy are underdeveloped. Not everybody values knowledge in the same way. For instance, if we look at the corporate sector, there are companies such as pharmaceuticals companies that are offering software as a service that are now taking substantial chunks of their profits, of their revenue, and channeling that into research and development. Why? Because they really see this innovation, agility, inherent dynamism as a key competitiveness driver in this world that we live in. But I think the other important element of creating this knowledge economy and creating this transmission mechanism is that we need to have intermediaries in whose interest it is to take knowledge and transform it into economic or financial value. So one basic example of this that we're all familiar with are, of course, consultants. They make their money by taking knowledge, by selling solutions. Another example are financial intermediaries. So one type of financial intermediary that has started to appear on the regional landscape, that has started to increase in importance, are venture capital investors that are essentially putting money into startups, but are at the same time putting money into new ideas. But this is a sector that is in a very, very uneven way globally. So, for instance, in the United States, the venture capital industry today puts 6 times, or in fact more than 6 times as much money into startups, into new ideas, than, for instance, its counterpart in the European Union. Although both geographies have impressive institutions, research centers, universities, etc. So the US system probably is more mature, and it is characterized by a higher appetite of risk that comes from this culture of trying out different ideas, and this process of trial and error that can then successfully refine these ideas and turn them into outcomes. I think what we also need to recognize is that for this to work, the people whose job it is to come up with new ideas, to invent new things, are typically not the same people who then turn those into commercializable innovations. So this is why I talked about the multiple pillars and the importance of having all of them in existence on a kind of a similar level.
With King Abdulaziz City for Sciences and Technology, to what extent the city participated with or collaborated with the private sector? And after this period, to what extent can we say that we have private sector organizations that have the awareness, the active presence, and maybe we can bet on these as active partners in building the knowledge economy? The city has built numerous partnerships with private organizations and agencies. We have joint national programs with the private sector, where we are working as consultants to develop their research and find tech solutions. As for the maturity of the private sector to accept the research activity and turn into knowledge economy, this in the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia is still applying only to the big companies, in fact, such as SABIC, for example, It is one of the big projects that have adopted R&D long time ago. And because of that adoption, SAP developed their products and output, and they are globally competitive, highly competitive, in fact. If the private sector reached that level, that R&D will allow them to compete locally and also to compete globally, then they are going to adopt the research activities. And such as Mr. Mazen said, it all depends on financing. And we have to see R&D not as activities, but as investment. So if the private sector is convinced that this is a good investment with financial rewards, they are going to invest in that. The difference here in terms of such investments is that they are very long-term investments. The return on these investments comes only 4 or 5 years later, or even after that. Such investments are also highly risking. So here the role of the government comes. The investments of research by the private sector is an interest, is a national interest. It increases productivity, it increases the growth level of the national economy. Therefore, there's an interest for the government here. And here where they have to, of course, such as the city and other organizations, we have to find financial incentives for these private sector agencies, such as the Ministry of Industry. It has a number of initiatives in this domain. Also in providing the required infrastructure to invest in R&D, the government is the one who provides the human resources to its educational organizations. To the private sector, the governance is also important. It plays a key role in investments of the private sector in R&D, where that they have also the patents and also the copyright. So the government's experience in incentivizing the private sector and diverting them into certain areas is positive, and we hope it's going to continue to grow. Thank you. In this area, Dr. Abdelaziz, the universities in Saudi Arabia, and I remember at some point there was a sort of growth in research chairs. You are part of that experience. How can you assess it? And how important is the quality training and education in building knowledge economy? No doubt, education is the foundation of development, technological development. So the better education, the better the learning outcomes, either in applied sciences or in humanities. Such quality and such high standards in education greatly contribute in creating specialized research centers and think tanks. And now we see in the universities and also the Ministry of Education created a whole research program based on the vision that identified the areas of research, including the environment, power, water resources, and these are major research areas. Here we have some universities because of their, for example, such as hospitality. The Al-Qura University in Mecca focused greatly on research and doing an integrated system of knowledge economy in servicing the pilgrims, and King Abdulaziz University has excellent efforts in area of the medical research, and it has a center for knowledge economy. It was recently established there. Yet, sometimes the geographical areas or the environment around you, it dictates certain requirements. King Saud University greatly participated in creating the coronavirus vaccine and provided all clinical research. So the universities, I call them the feedstock. They are either in terms of researchers, scholars, the outcomes that they can come. Sometimes, because of certain conditions, these centers are impacted by the financial resources, because we haven't reached building independent endowments for universities to support the research centers that can finance these research without either the semi-government, the government, or the private research centers to have its financial independence so that they can be sustainable. If we take, for example, major universities in the world, you find that their science endowments are big, such as Harvard, for example. Yes, in Japan, Yes, of course. In Japan has allocated $95 billion. By the way, when we spoke at the beginning that there is $1 trillion and $700 billion, 10% of the countries are spending 80% because these are the major industrial countries. They believe in the importance of spending on R&D and its key role. The knowledge dimension, especially, there are 4 sectors the government benefit in relation to providing their requirements and services, and allows the decision making the universities because they provide the knowledge that help the researchers and scholars to reach the corporate sector also, such as Dr. Abdullah has mentioned. SABIC, Aramco has 2 research centers because they have a refined product of what we call as and they are looking for global markets that can be better produced locally and produced or to downstream it. So Aramco has is interest. So more of these research centers and more of these in the industrial and the mining sectors as well that we are interested in the kingdom, then you find that they have greater expenditure. So it is an integrated partnership. The government plays a key role in supporting these research centers because when we talk about 4.7% of GDP in South Korea is spent on scientific research, this is a huge percentage. So when we see that in Japan or the United States, Germany, Finland, all of these countries that gave a top priority to R&D, however, the foundation is key education that graduates, quality graduates, a better or important environment that opens up opportunities. Investment here is very risky. And there's a high risk here because it depends on experiments, and you might be spending a lot of resources on one research, and then you discover that another research center has reached better outcomes, and such as the corona vaccine, the global race. So there was a kind of race and cooperation. Germany and America had to cooperate. Oxford and another agency had to work together. So collaboration is key. 4 countries emerged here: China with Russia with Sputnik V, and UK and America and Germany. So had it not been for this global cooperation and exchange of information, the data and the analysis, we couldn't have reached a better outcome that could bridge the gaps. We say there's a vaccine, a Pfizer that needs a certain temperature, another vaccine says that we can provide the same outcomes or similar outcomes, but we don't need this very low temperature. This is an exchange that happens between think tanks. This is a key issue with you, Dr. Kotelin. Today in global economies, the major economies in the world that witness a continuous competition, knowledge economy, is it going to feed this competition? Or do you think it will lead to building a sort of collaboration towards a more progressive, collaborative global economy with the example of the corona research on vaccines?
I don't think that this question has an unambiguous answer. I think research, the development of knowledge, is in some ways inherently about a competition of ideas, and obviously anybody who spent time in the academic world knows that there is competition for a lot of things. But I think this competition has to go hand in hand with 2 things. Number 1, a culture of openness, and number 2, obviously then a culture of cooperation. Now, in some ways, still paradoxically, countries think about the creation of a knowledge economy in primarily national terms. Yet we live in a world where ideas are global, they travel faster than ever before, where the profession has become international, and people who are, if you like, knowledge workers, who are experts, in many cases work as almost as global citizens. And there is a lot of experience in the human history to suggest that it is this kind of openness that drives not only the generation of knowledge, but also the dissemination of knowledge. The other element of this openness is that we've talked about R&D at universities and research centers, talked about R&D at corporations, at companies, but really these should not be two separate pillars. So when we look at the sort of successful emergence of the knowledge economy, where do we see, if you like, the global pioneers? Probably the first one internationally was Silicon Valley, which with some government money made a start, but turned into a symbiotic relationship between a cluster of academic institutions on the one hand and private sector companies on the other hand. And the private companies are given sustainability to this because they make their money by commercializing innovation, but they can also drive the agendas and drive the financial bottom line of these universities by collaborating with them on different ideas. And of course, we've seen the Silicon Valley really go global. We've seen the same idea with the MIT or the Cambridge Biotech Cluster or the Silicon Fen, as they call it, around Cambridge, UK. Many universities around the world now have this circle of private businesses around them, and they work together. And they work together because people have eliminated the kinds of regulatory restrictions that in the past made such collaboration difficult, and they have created mutual financial incentives that then are driving progress. And that this is important because as knowledge is transmitted, shared, it develops greater velocity, and I think its impact increases. But at the same time, while this has to happen in the context of between businesses and universities or research centers, it also has to happen between countries. And the corona vaccine example that was mentioned is a very good case in point. I think in some ways, as the knowledge economy takes root, it gives us a world where some of these traditional differences, these different pillars, probably become less. When we look at the largest 1,000 corporate investors, their R&D expenditure is now 40% of total global R&D. In the United States, businesses account for 2/3 of the R&D that happens. But it doesn't typically happen completely in isolation.
Mr. Mazen, if you have any comment on Dr. Kotelin's point, and I would like that if we look at many big projects in the kingdom, a great part of these in one way or another is based on knowledge economy, relies on knowledge economy, or in some aspects is an outcome of knowledge economy. NEOM, for example, other new mega projects, the excellence is greatly related to knowledge economy, and the future bet is on the knowledge economy, right? Yes. The impact of knowledge economy is growing globally, but I would like to comment with Dr. Abdullah, and I support his point about supporting the R&D. The support is different from the free market, which is an over 300 years old principle, the free market. But unless we have new industries, and if our economy, and without Keynes' principle with the Great Depression, that the state has to become a major consumer and great supporter in order to re-kick the economy, but it was objected by such as Dr. Hayek, a Nobel laureate. However, the state has to play a role in supporting this change, incentivizing research, playing its role as in governance and financer. But money is not always a solution. You can spend billions but not reach a big output. I would hire the point of someone, Mr. Peter Dale, who established PayPal 20 years ago. He had a book from 0 to 1, which is a key book. The book says that money, one of the inputs is important in development, that if you want to develop a product, if you want to enhance its efficiency. But innovation, no. Here you need a creative environment and a culture. Our problem in Saudi, not our problem, the change or the development is cultural. I believe that the vision is more of a cultural change than an economic change. For me, the vision is a cultural change in our thoughts, in our beliefs, in our dreams. Look at the people. Everything has changed. The change of mentality. So this cultural and social change is the key to accept the risks, to deal with these changes. The foundation of R&D is to see the demand, but not to finance the product. That the product itself finds a problem and develop a solution. Dr. Abdullah mentioned that SABIC is one of the greatly spending because they deal with an end product, because they have to deal with the challenges of the environment. But this culture has to grow. In the services sector and the world of data, we find a young generation that tries to create new services. We've seen new applications, many apps in the field of services. But I believe that education is extremely important. We're not all Steve Jobs. Steve Jobs is an exception here, is not the foundation. The foundation is education. So if I would say again that the cultural change is extremely important, that can be enhanced in the services and the product of the knowledge economy. Would you like to comment, please? In addition to my hope that we can focus on the position of knowledge economy in the future projects. Of course, I totally agree that money is not everything. And when we look at the innovation and research systems, they have 6 inputs. Money is one of them. The governance and the laws that protect all the rights of the key players, the human resources, the culture, as he mentioned, because you see today a big reason of the private sector's hesitance to R&D because they don't see an economic feasibility. So when we change the culture for the private sector, and is key. One of the enablers is also the management of knowledge, identifying the players in the research system, and they have to know each other. Unless no agency can do all the research by itself. There has to be collaboration. There has to be with universities, think tanks, private sector, government. Such as Dr. Cottonen has said, there are companies that are based on knowledge transfer from the discovery into the marketing, and I call them such as the technology transfer agencies or enhancers that push these technologies from the laboratories into the market. A final comment to what Mr. Mazen has said, that there are 2 incentives or motivators in research. The first is the market demand. Usually the market demands certain products, therefore the research tries to supply this demand and develop such products to satisfy the market needs. On the other hand, there are inventions that create new markets. And the examples are so many. For example, drones. There was no demand for drones in logistics for drones. However, the presence of this technology, I'm speaking about drones and their applications in various sectors, in logistics, even in the agricultural sector. There are applications and uses for drones. It is a two-way trend. Sometimes the industries demand certain technologies, or sometimes there's a push by the R&D towards a new products in the markets. Doctor, you would like to comment, but we would like to focus on the centralization or of knowledge economy in the new projects in Saudi. I believe that the kingdom has been early on aware of that need, and we have built when you send 200,000 students to study abroad with the exchange program in the United States, Australia, Japan, Australia, you are learning a new culture, you are learning knowledge, you are learning information and data, and then you return back home. So through what they have seen in the world and what they have learned in R&D, it helps them to open up new horizons. This is probably more felt in the applied sciences, as we see it in engineering, in medicine and technology. We see it more clearly than in humanities, which is less intangible. But the kingdom has tried to provide the tools, right, through the Ministry of Education, the universities, the research and think tanks, or in the King Abdulaziz City for Sciences and Technology. For the first time we hear of nanotechnology, it was through the King Abdulaziz City for Sciences and Technology. So these initiatives in the kingdom are found at various levels, and even in the economic cities, they are based on a knowledge economy in the first and foremost, more than being heavy industries. The heavy industry was done in the Jubail and Yambo city at a certain time, the refineries, the SABIC or the petrochemicals. However, the concept of logistics has transformed. So in any country, the train that connects the east and west, it is part of the transformation and based on knowledge economy and using the best means possible. So it has positively impacted all the future projects, and the government has made its allocations and resources. And we always ask this question, that what is the added value of this product or this service and for this project? So when the Crown Prince spoke about the new project in Neom, and he called it the Line, he spoke about a future vision with various features such as pollution, such as transformation, transportation. It was built on a clear future vision. Yes, it is still, some believe that we still haven't reached where we want to. However, we are on the right line, and as long as we have this culture and vision, then we are, I believe, on the right track in our educational system, in our universities. The foreign universities that are allowed now to establish branches here and the GCC countries, it emphasizes the importance of knowledge transformation and nationalization of knowledge. So if you talk about universities that have long years experience in certain sectors, and they open up or they have partners with the kingdom in the kingdom and have their own specialized centers, and they transform and nationalize the knowledge, they greatly speed up the pace towards the knowledge economy. Dr. Kotelin, I believe we need to deal with the issue of, I mean, in such discussion, the role of the international organizations in supporting and enabling the knowledge economy, such as the World Bank, such as IMF, such as other international organizations. What is the role of these organizations in enhancing and developing the knowledge economy at a global level, and in showing the impact of knowledge economy on poorer countries in the world?
Yeah, I think these institutions play an important role. Perhaps the most important aspect of it is they can build awareness of the need for a knowledge economy, of how knowledge economy can work in practice. What these international institutions can also bring to the table is the ability to sort of share the experiences of early leaders, if you like. So in many cases, even with the development of the knowledge economy, people are better at emulating and adapting than they are at inventing something in scratch. And there is nothing wrong with that, because this is typically how this evolutionary process towards a knowledge economy works. If we look at the history of Japan as a manufacturing power, or we look at more recently the evolution of China, and it was about taking ideas from elsewhere, adapting them locally, and then over time building capacity around those. I think that these development institutions also have an important role in building a case for incorporating aspects of the knowledge economy in government policy. And in many cases, of course, this is done then additionally through technical assistance that they provide in terms of implementing some of these proposals and making them work in the local context. So I do think that they have an important constructive role to play in this process. And what is perhaps even more interesting about them, given, of course, their sort of institutional stature and their long history, their big footprint on the landscape, is that this is not something that they have any reason to think of as a one-off, what I said earlier, a magic bullet solution. I think one very important aspect of this cultural assimilation that people talked about is accepting that the knowledge economy is not a destination, it is a journey. It is an evolutionary journey that never stops. And I think that in that sense, the international institutions do have a role to play in terms of sharing experiences, in terms of benchmarking countries. Earlier, somebody mentioned these indices that the United Nations, the World Bank produce. Again, these can help countries refine their strategies as they develop their knowledge economies. But I think that is important because progress very often, almost always, is an incremental process. So it is about how, whether it's at the corporate level or at the national level, we can study what we've done, how we can make it work better, how we can create additional value out of what we have. And it is this incremental dynamism that then builds and perpetuates capacity.
I would ask our colleagues and our viewers to take a short break, and then we will come back.
وش نقصد بالاقتصاد المعرفي؟ المقصود هو استخدام المعرفة في ترجمة الأفكار إلى منتجات تجارية ذات عائد اقتصادي. الفكرة ربما تكون بسيطة وربما تكون معقدة كتلك التي تنتج من الأبحاث، كلاهما يتطلب احتكارهما ببراءة اختراع، يتم العمل على ترجمتها إلى منتج ليتم تصنيعه ومن ثم تسويقه. إن مقياس أداء الجامعات هو بقدر مساهمتها في دعم الاقتصاد من خلال الأبحاث والابتكارات وخلق التقنية التي تنتهي بتدشين المشاريع التجارية والصناعية. جامعات عالمية كإكسفورد وهارفارد وستانفورد تماثل عوائدها من الشركات التابعة لها ميزانيات بعض الدول. والآن، هل يمكن للاقتصاد المعرفي أن يكون بديلاً عن النفط؟ مركز الملك عبدالله العالمي للأبحاث الطبية.
From the Communication and Financial Knowledge Center at the Ministry of Finance, welcome to a discussion of investing in research to enable the knowledge economy, and our partners Dr. Abdulaziz bin Sagar, Dr. Abdullah Al-Raddadi, Mr. Mazen El-Sederi, and Dr. Yarmo Kurtulin. I will return to the issue which I believe is a fundamental issue, which is probably what Dr. Kurtulin focused on. To what extent can we bet on the international organizations to enhance and support knowledge economy? I would like to refer to what he said about the competitiveness. Many countries are competing in knowledge economy. What international organizations are doing is supporting many countries for a mutual interest. Now the world is one big system. One country is suffering, then many countries are suffering likewise, related, of course, in supply chains and other interests. International organizations fundamentally support these countries, provide recommendations in order to enhance their economies, such as, and I can give you an example, the OECD is one of the organizations that provide recommendations and studies to countries in order to improve their economies. And the state has the option either to accept these recommendations or not. They are supportive, and I believe these organizations are only providing a consultative, playing an advisory role, and may not be, in many cases, a key role. If you have any comment on the role of international organizations, and we can also return to universities. Are they expected to be, let us say, in Saudi Arabia, are they expected in this period to be producing a knowledge economy, or are we expecting another project from outside the academia to come to enable universities or prepare them to do R&D products? The main universities provided the mechanism that allowed turning these researchers or subjects into products, such what we call the Riyadh Valley, Jeddah Valley, or the King KFUPM in the Eastern region. They found the mechanisms, and now these universities are expected or required to find the concepts that allow them to sustain themselves without relying on the government. These universities, such as KSU and King Abdulaziz University, KFUPM, are expected to find creative ideas. So the creativity is not only in a building which we lease to a government and achieve a certain income. They must have out-of-the-box ideas. The the King Abdullah University has an endowment where we focused on applied sciences, first and foremost. Of course, I'm speaking about KAUST. They have used the experiments of American, such as Stanford Research, and or with TRI, Triangle Institute in the States. They benefited from their experiences in the business incubators. I believe these universities play two roles. Yes, they can generate ideas, but in generating these ideas, they need partnerships with the private sector, the end user of this product, which will market this product and launch it into the market. Therefore, they welcomed international cooperation. They care not only for local cooperation but they are looking for international markets as well. They welcomed the cooperation with international specialized companies in various areas and sectors. Therefore, their role is dual. Let's say that university education organizations, how can they, one way or another, make them play a role in launching or enhancing the early on concepts of knowledge economy, and that knowledge is for production and it is not only for retention? I believe such as TVTC, or if they were fully supported, that their role is not only on crafts or development of crafts, but to develop that further on, that we have training center concepts that turn them into end user products or research and studies that can be built in the markets. Many countries don't have enough or percentages of graduates from higher universities, but they have more graduates from technical institutions or two-year technical institutions that are mostly directed or related to the requirements of the market or the industry. So it's not only the universities, but these technical or vocational training, such as in Japan, for example. I visited a huge building for Toyota, which is or R&D. they were thinking 14 years ago how they will be moving into the electrical cars, the hybrid cars, the stations, the costs. So the R&D, or early on R&D, we see a company like Tesla, for example, their shares are bigger than 100 years old companies, because they are relied on knowledge economy and saving energy. So their market value grew tremendously. If we take 4 companies in America that are based on knowledge economy: Amazon, Microsoft, Apple, and their volume in the market is about 70 countries in the world. Dr. Kotelin, a question I would like to ask: to what extent the political tendencies or can somehow impact the think tanks or have an influence on research R&D about in the world, and to what extent this can reflect on the output of these think tanks or research centers?
Yeah, if I understand you correctly, you are talking about the role of the relationship between think tanks and the policymaking establishment in terms of driving the development of knowledge. And of course, most think tanks do have they are anchored in the political establishment. Many of them do have a particular ideological, etc. I think it's an interesting model in terms of advancing knowledge, because what is important about having these ideological or political agendas is that there is this inbuilt competition. People are trying to sort of debate each other. They are trying to outwit each other with ideas. But I think that this is one of these ideas where, or one of these areas where accountability matters. So it's important that the think tanks also play by certain rules, and in particular, they need to have their ideas or arguments be supported by transparent and evidence-based research that people can then analyze, and they can compare it with the views of other think tanks. And clearly, this is something that has been going on for a long time. In fact, the earliest think tanks, I think the oldest one, which is RUSI in the UK, was set up in the 19th century, but we have ones that were set up before the Second World War: Carnegie, Brookings, and soon thereafter the Rand Institution. These are all institutions that have played an important role in advancing the development of knowledge and the development of ideas in various ways. But I think the reality is we also have good examples and less good examples. And let me give you a contrast of 2 examples from the UK. Somebody earlier mentioned Friedrich Hayek. He obviously was a big supporter of think tanks and supporter of deregulation and liberal economic ideas. Now, it was one of these think tanks, the Institute for Economic Affairs, funded, set up by Anthony Fisher, that then helped drive this so-called Thatcherite revolution, the rise of free market ideas in the 1980s, which of course went global. It proved tremendously impactful and effective because it was underpinned by a lot of analysis, studies, research. Now, a more recent example, of course, is this Brexit discussion, which I see really as more of a debate between opinions rather than evidence. And what's interesting is that people, including the European Research Group that was heavily involved in this, did talk about analysis and ideas, but clearly for Brexit there was no definition, there was no plan, there was no strategy. One could argue even today there is no clear strategy of what Brexit means in practice. So what I'm saying here is I think the think tank scene is diverse, and it's an area where impact depends on governance.
Thank you. Mr. Mazen, this is probably related to your field or experience directly. You are the head of research at Rajhi Financial Company. Generally, to what extent today are the financial organizations or agencies in the kingdom have R&D or think tank research centers, or even if they do, to what extent are these effective? That have a positive influence or impact in supporting the sector and supporting its outcomes and its future? Thank you for the question, but there's an important part what I would like to comment on, which is the expenditure or spending on R&D and education. In the past, there's a famous theory which is called total factor productivity. This theory is based on that the introduction is based on the worker. With the technological development, it's the worker and the machine, and now it's the machine, the worker, and the technology. Now the machine develops with technology, and the worker has to develop his skills. So in all the education, the K to 12, the vocational training, the higher education, and even in the banking sector, we have a great executive education, which can be done online, and you can earn degrees. So now the R&D, we are late in the R&D in terms of our expense. Previously in the kingdom, of course, there has to be spending on developing the skills of your staff to be competitive. I can give you a number by the Bank of England. You're speaking about bank research. The Bank of England issued a study a year ago expecting 12% of jobs with AI will die out. Survival is the fittest. What are the jobs that were done and previously? We have to leave it for the machine and do something new. The jobs that machine cannot take from humans, which are based in innovation and communication. So a great extent we believe that the society, the role of society or the community in the development, you know that for example, the recent judicial reforms I believe they are more important than the improvement of the oil prices, because they are cyclical, they go up and down. But this transformation if we have more stability in the country, in the kingdom, they will have more confidence, and then we can be more productive. And I believe everyone was very happy. It was a historical moment for us here. So we come back here to the concept of capital. Adam Smith was De Soto in his and the development of laws in the country. The development of laws are important. So this is important. If we spend more on education with the development of life, and AI taking the role of many jobs is very important in line with R&D. In brief, the research organizations or agencies and the local financial research is diversified, either in developing the financial products, which is for the local. All banks have R&D or research centers? Yes, but they don't call them, they call them development centers. The name is different. They try to reach better products, provide more services to more clients, but the research centers are either interested in the investment or the economic situation. That's what you see in public. My comment that in 1981 in Chase Manhattan, they had a division in a company which is called Chase World Information Corporation. This is mostly about research, and through this desk I visited China in 1981 based on the data that I obtained there. So it is there as big as the company, its agency, its relation to the state. So you mentioned about the political decision in research. Shell oil and shell gas are an outcome of research that took place, and this is because the United States wanted to reduce its dependency on importing power oil from outside. India imposed 2% taxes on sales as a CSR for the companies to spend on education and other R&D, and Fraunhofer Institute in Germany was established after the World War II to support the research. Xerox started, for example, as an R&D outcome. the internet was also a military use and part of R&D. So at the end of the day, it's the comprehensiveness. It has to do with all these particles. I would like also to take a second break, and then we move on to the last part. Welcome to the last part of our discussion of the Communication and Financial Knowledge Center by the Ministry of Finance initiative with our guests, Dr. Abdulaziz Sagad, Mr. Mazen Al-Sudairi, Dr. Abdullah Raddadi, and Dr. Yama Kotelin. In this last part of our discussion about investing in research to enable the knowledge economy, we have some questions. Dr. Abdulaziz bin Sagad, what is the investment trend in the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia, and how can researchers follow or join research centers, and how it is possible for the students of universities to communicate with research centers? Investment is still limited, especially by the private sector in relation to R&D. However, most research centers and think tanks are either belonging to universities or government agencies, and these centers should provide what is called internships for the students who would like to join based on their domains. There are centers in the Ministry of Finance, the Ministry of Interior, the National Security, and also in the Ministry of Economy. So these government agencies plus the universities with the number of they can provide internships to develop, because it's very important to provide the right environment through which they can do their research without to be out of the box that you are giving to them, so that they can discuss and freely attend meetings, activities, webinars, workshops, and participate with our researchers and exchange programs. These programs with the UAE, with the EU, with the USA, of course, student exchange programs between those sites. I believe, I remember through our branch in the UAE in Dubai, we trained over 500 students from various UAE universities. Some of them are now ambassadors in the UAE, and others are key officials in the government. This is because of the training center, and thank God, many students from the kingdom studied outside, for example, in France, in Sciences Po. There were Saudi students. I remember in one of the meetings with the human rights organization, there were some students here from Saudi. I was happy that they were trainees in our center in social sciences. And you, Dr. Abdulaziz, are the private sector organizations participating in financing R&D? unfortunately, they want to see and they want to see how many viewers. So their advertisements, sometimes they see it as economic conferences they want to sponsor because it gives them higher exposure or viewership at higher levels, and it gives them a bigger hit. Dr. Abdullah Raddadi. The agencies or organizations such as CAXT, to what extent do they focus on knowledge economy or digital knowledge economy in their research and in their education economic outcomes? The IT is a sector divided into different sectors as well. The Institute of Technology and IT Information. There's also the cyber security, there's robotics, there's cyber security. There's about 4 or 5 sectors. They are all under the digital sector. And we are very active in collaboration with big universities in the world, MIT, Oxford, Cambridge, and Berkeley, and other important universities. This question now to Dr. Kotelin. To what extent are the classification indices of international organizations can determine to which extent countries are advanced or not advanced in knowledge economy in terms of their research output or their products based on knowledge economy?
To a significant extent, I think that countries that do well, if you like, rank well in those indices, tend to be countries that have a mature knowledge economy ecosystem, that have significant amounts of investment going into R&D, and have a lot of these mechanisms in place that allow for knowledge to be transmitted from ideas into commercial propositions. So these are, by and large, countries that have the knowledgeable human capital. They are countries that have a very developed information ecosystem infrastructure. They have a legal system and an institutional system that designs, protects, preserves knowledge and innovation. And then, of course, they have this multitude of different institutions, different players that are active, and these all reinforce each other and create this virtual development cycle. We've mentioned some of the examples earlier: South Korea, obviously the United States, etc. But what is also, I think, important to bear in mind is that these rankings, they are a snapshot at a particular time in a country's history. And I go back to what I was talking about earlier. The process of creating a knowledge economy is a process. It's not a destination. It's not a moment. It is an evolutionary journey. And for instance, colleagues have been talking about some of the massive, impressive investments that are happening in Saudi Arabia today, and indeed across the GCC region, in the creation of capacity, in the creation of talent in different areas. It is important for us to bear in mind that not all of these investments produce a return on a similar time scale. So I think what we have in the Gulf today is movement, good momentum in the right direction, necessarily yet get reflected in all those rankings. But that is not to say that it will not. What I think is very important about ambitions such as the Saudi vision and of course these long-term strategies that all the regional economies in various ways are pursuing is that there is today a very strong political commitment to change of the sort that I think will enable these countries not only to build these knowledge-based economies, but to become and remain increasingly competitive in that process.
Thank you. The question to Mr. Mazen Al-Sudairi. What is the future of investment in knowledge economy and research, and what are the most prepared sectors that need the knowledge economy? It's an extremely important question. In fact, I believe the future is globally is going to be towards knowledge economy. The sectors that will go forward and develop are numerous, and we find on top after the coronavirus is the renewable energy are extremely important, and I believe even the recent mega projects advertisement, they speak so much about the economy. I'm sorry, the environment, such as the Line and the Red Sea projects. They care about the environment, but the gradual growth or development there, we agree that it is going a question of time. But does the kingdom have the foundations? Do we have the elements? I think I am sure that none in the world knows the sure answers. These are only visions. But the key rule of education, the human resources, the financial resources, the logistical infrastructure, and the legal system, this infrastructure is extremely important. And of course, the will and the vision. We might be a little bit late, we could arrive a little bit earlier, but the foundation is there. The last part, our dear part, a recommendation. The knowledge tools are an enabler of the economy through the knowledge economy. This comes through two things. First, the vision of the kingdom. Our vision in 2030, we announced NEOM, and it is one of the biggest projects of the vision, and it shows that the future is for knowledge economy and smart cities. So R&D, research, and knowledge interest should be in this direction because this is the state trend. The other is knowing what the future technologies we need. And here for two reasons. First, because some of these future technologies could have risks for the kingdom, such as the technologies mentioned by Dr. Abdulaziz, of the ones that impacted the price of oil. So not investing here, it might negatively impact us. The other reason is investing these technologies in the future. If we're looking for a knowledge economy as a tool to develop the economy and to grow, we have to know the future technologies that open future opportunities. Your last recommendation, please. Looking for future technologies to invest. Dr. Abdulaziz, a brief and a recommendation. We have a special experience in international collaboration. We have an annual R&D and GCC research conference. This is the 11th year. We have 83 countries participating in it started first with a low level. Now we have over 25% of participants who are coming from outside, and over 600 specialized researchers come into the workshops. So that gives the international dimension of international collaboration and partnerships in terms of the knowledge transfer and choosing your right partners. The recommendation, I believe, that R&D is like planting palms. Palm trees take time, but when it yields its fruit, that's for a very relatively long time. So such investment is very profitable over the long term, and it gives greater returns. Dr. Courtelin, in 30 seconds, if you could give us a summary and a recommendation or a suggestion which you believe is going to be important in enhancing knowledge economy. In the GCC, at least,
yes.
If we could talk about it.
Oh, okay. I do think that, the key elements are in place. I think things are on the right track. What is important is to create this culture of a commitment to ongoing dynamism, ongoing change, and as part of that, a culture where the progress is continuously reviewed and people are committed to this idea of ongoing improvement. It is important not to fall in the trap of silver bullets or magic bullets. This is not something that can be instantaneous, but if something is not working as well as people want it to, it is usually possible to improve it, and over time the benefits will accrue.
Mr. Mazen? Let's go back to the fundamentals. Education, the private sector financing the agencies in developing education based on research and project-based, but not lecturing. Innovation and creation in the company, in the society, and the role of the private sector also to know that the knowledge economy is the future and it is going to be leading the future. Thank you, Mr. Mazen Al-Sudairi, the head of research at Al-Rajhi Financial. Thanks to Dr. Yamo Kotelin, economic and strategic expert, and also to our participants here in the studio, Dr. Abdullah Al-Raddadi, the Director of National Planning at CACS, and Dr. Abdulaziz Sakr, Chairman of the Gulf Research Center. Thanks also to you, our viewers, and everyone who was following this renewed quality webinar that we hope is shedding light on key aspects of the knowledge economy. Until we see you again in the future as part of the strategic communication program led by the Communication Financial Knowledge Center.